The morning after the incident with the Stallion, the entire town seemed to be talking about little else. Men who had spent years boasting about their ability to handle horses suddenly found themselves describing how a schoolteacher had succeeded where they had failed. Women repeated the story in kitchens and general stores, often with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Wished they would stop. She had never enjoyed attention. By the end of the week, she hoped the excitement would fade and life would return to normal. Instead, something unexpected happened. Caleb Turner appeared at the schoolhouse. At first, assumed he had come regarding his daughter, Lucy. The 8-year-old girl attended classes there and was amongst students. Quiet and thoughtful, Lucy possessed her father's gray eyes and the same tendency to keep her feelings hidden. "Good afternoon, Miss Hart," Caleb said from the doorway. The children immediately sat straighter. Even they seemed intimidated by him. Mr. Turner replied, "I wanted to ask how Lucy is doing." The question surprised her. "She's doing well." "Is she?" "Yes." Caleb then stood there, silently, as though he had forgotten why he came. Finally, he cleared his throat. "That's good." Then he left. Watched him ride away, slightly puzzled. The following week, he returned. And then again the week after that. Sometimes he asked about Lucy's studies. Sometimes he brought books the girl might enjoy. Once he claimed he needed advice about whether she should continue practicing her handwriting. Quickly realized that none of these matters truly required a personal visit. Yet Caleb kept finding reasons to come. Their conversations remained formal at first. Brief, careful. Neither spoke much. But gradually, something changed. The silences stopped feeling uncomfortable. One afternoon, Caleb arrived while Lucy finished an assignment. As the child worked, and Caleb sat outside beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Caleb surprised her. "I don't understand children." Laughed softly. "You're not supposed to." His expression remained serious. "I mean it. I know. Lucy barely speaks some days. She's grieving." The answer came gently. Caleb stared toward the horizon. "Her mother died 3 years ago." "I know. I thought time would make it easier." "Sometimes it does. And sometimes people simply learn to carry the pain." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Caleb slowly. He looked relieved, as though someone had finally explained something he had been struggling to understand for years. From that day forward, their friendship began growing naturally. Not through grand gestures, not through dramatic declarations, but through small moments. Conversations after school, brief meetings in town, shared laughter over Lucy's observations. The more time Caleb spent with, the more he noticed things others overlooked. She remembered every student's birthday. She repaired torn books herself because the school could not afford replacements. She often skipped buying things for herself so struggling families could receive supplies for their children. She possessed a quiet strength that never demanded recognition. Meanwhile, began seeing beyond Caleb's stern reputation. Beneath his rugged exterior lived a man carrying enormous loneliness. A man who blamed himself for things beyond his control. A man who loved his daughter deeply but feared he was failing her. Neither admitted how much they enjoyed one another's company. But both knew. The person who noticed first was Lucy. One afternoon, the girl looked up from her schoolwork. "Miss Hart." "Yes." "Will you come visit the ranch again?" Smiled. "If your father invites me." Lucy's face brightened. "He always looks after talking to you." The comment caught off guard. Before she could respond, Lucy returned to her assignment. Yet the words lingered. Unfortunately, not everyone viewed their growing friendship kindly. Soon spread throughout town. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Men exchanged knowing smiles. Some treated the situation as entertainment. Others treated it as a mistake. One afternoon entered the general store and paused near a display of fabric. She had not been noticed. Several women stood nearby speaking quietly. At least they thought they were speaking quietly. A man like Caleb Turner could marry almost anyone. Exactly. Why would he settle for a schoolteacher pushing 40? Laughter followed. Froze. Another voice joined. Perhaps he's simply grateful she calmed his horse. That doesn't mean he'll marry her. He needs a wife, not an old maid. More laughter. Each word struck harder than the last. Place the fabric back on the shelf. Without purchasing anything, she quietly left the store. Outside, she forced herself to keep walking. Her face remained calm. But inside, something had broken. That evening, she sat alone beside her father's fireplace long after dark. Perhaps the women were right. Perhaps she had been foolish. For weeks, she had allowed herself to enjoy Caleb's company. She had begun imagining possibilities she should have abandoned years ago. The realization filled her with embarrassment. The next morning, she made a decision. She would create distance. For everyone's sake. Especially Caleb's. When he visited the schoolhouse later that week, remained polite but noticeably reserved. Their conversations became shorter. When he invited her to visit the ranch, she declined. When he stopped to speak in town, she found reasons to leave. Caleb noticed immediately. At first he assumed she was busy. Then he assumed she was tired. Eventually, he realized neither explanation fit. Something had changed, and he had no idea why. The person affected most was Lucy. "Why doesn't Miss Hart come anymore?" she asked one evening during supper. Caleb looked up. "I don't know. Did I do something wrong?" "No. Did she stop liking us?" The question troubled him, because secretly he had been asking himself the same thing. Days turned into weeks. The distance continued growing. Then one afternoon, Caleb entered the general store and overheard a conversation he was never meant to hear. Several women stood discussing. The words made his blood run cold. Mockery, cruel jokes, remarks about her age, comments about how ridiculous she looked beside a wealthy rancher. Caleb listened in stunned silence. For the first time, he understood exactly why he had withdrawn. And as he rode home beneath the setting sun, one truth became impossible to ignore. The thought of losing her hurt far more than he ever imagined it could. Caleb Turner had never cared much about the opinions of other people. For years he had ignored gossip, avoided town politics, and lived according to his own. Ranching taught a man quickly that cattle did not care about, and storms did not change direction because someone complained. Yet as he rode home from the general store, anger burned inside him. Not because people had spoken poorly of him, because they had spoken poorly of. The women who mocked her had never spent an afternoon in her classroom. They had never seen her comfort a frightened child. They had never watched her sacrifice her own happiness for others. Yet they judged her worth by a number. Her age. Nothing more. The realization disgusted him. For weeks he had wondered why suddenly withdrew from him. Now he understood. She had been protecting herself from humiliation, and perhaps protecting him as well. The thought made him feel ashamed. While she had endured those cruel remarks alone, he had remained unaware. That would end. The following days passed slowly. Caleb considered several ways to approach the situation. Part of him wanted to ride directly to his house and explain everything. Another part knew she deserved more than private reassurance. The entire town had witnessed the gossip. The entire town needed to witness the truth. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. The annual harvest festival was approaching, drawing ranchers, merchants, and families from miles around. It was the largest gathering of the year. By sunset, the town square overflowed with people. Lanterns glowed above crowded streets. Musicians played cheerful tunes. Children raced between food stalls. Almost chose not to attend. She had little desire to stand among the same people who whispered behind her back. But her father encouraged her. "You cannot spend your life hiding from foolish people," he said gently. Reluctantly, she agreed. She arrived shortly after sunset, wearing a simple blue dress she had owned for years. Nothing extravagant. Nothing designed to attract attention. As usual, many people barely noticed her. A few offered polite greetings. Others exchanged knowing glances. Ignored them all. She moved quietly through the crowd, hoping to remain unnoticed. Then she saw Caleb, standing near the center of the square. Tall, serious, watching her. Their eyes met briefly. Looked away. The familiar ache returned immediately. She still cared for him. That had always been the problem. Before she could leave, a voice called from behind. "Miss Hart." "Lucy." The little girl came running through the crowd and threw her arms around. Laughed despite herself. "Lucy, I was hoping you'd come." The child refused to let go. Nearby, Caleb approached. For a moment, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. Then Caleb spoke. The sound of her name in his voice felt strangely intimate. "Mr. Turner, we need to talk." She shook her head slightly. "There isn't anything left to discuss." "There is." His tone left little room for argument. Before she could respond, the festival organizer stepped onto a wooden platform near the center of town. A bell rang. The crowd gradually gathered. Announcements began. Competitions, awards, community recognitions, prepared to slip away unnoticed. Then Caleb did something completely unexpected. He stepped onto the platform. The crowd immediately fell silent. Everyone knew Caleb Turner. Few had ever seen him volunteer to speak publicly. Even looked surprised. Caleb surveyed the gathering. His expression remained calm, but his voice carried clearly across the square. "There is something I wish to address." Curiosity spread instantly. People exchanged glances. The gossipers leaned forward eagerly. Caleb continued. "For several months, I have heard opinions regarding a certain woman in this town." The crowd became very quiet. The stomach tightened. She knew exactly where this was going. "So have I," someone muttered. Caleb's gaze swept across the gathering. "Many people call her an old maid." The words landed heavily. No one spoke. Some believe her age determines her value. His voice hardened slightly. Others believe a woman becomes less worthy simply because she has not married. Several faces turned red. Caleb continued. "I disagree." Silence. Absolute silence. Then he looked directly at. For the first time, everyone followed his gaze. The entire town suddenly understood. I have known many people in my life, Caleb said. I have met wealthy people, educated people, powerful people. He paused. Very few possess Hart's character. Felt her breath catch. The crowd stared. No one moved. No one spoke. She is brave. His eyes never left hers. She is kind. A few people lowered their heads. She is intelligent. The square remained completely silent. And she has more strength than most men I know. Emotion tightens chest. Years of ridicule. Years of loneliness. Years of believing she was somehow less valuable than others. For the first time, someone was challenging those beliefs publicly. Caleb took another step forward. When a frightened horse threatened this town, she showed courage. When children need guidance, she provides it. When people require kindness, she gives it freely. His voice softened. The truth is simple. Everyone waited, while others saw an old maid. He smiled faintly. I saw the finest woman I have ever known. A stunned hush swept through the crowd. Several women looked away in embarrassment. Others stared in disbelief, felt tears threatening her composure. Then something even more unexpected happened. Lucy broke free from the crowd and ran toward her. The little girl wrapped her arms around his waist. Please don't leave us anymore, she whispered. The simple words nearly shattered remaining. She the child tightly. Nearby, Caleb stepped down from the platform. The crowd parted for him. Slowly he approached. His expression held none of his usual reserve. Only honesty. When he reached, he stopped. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Caleb took a steady breath. I spent years believing my life ended when I lost my wife. Listened silently. I was wrong. His voice remained calm. But I didn't realize that until I met you. Tears blurred her vision. The square disappeared around them. There was only Caleb. Only Lucy. Only this moment. Then Caleb did something no one expected. He dropped to one knee. Gasps erupted across the crowd. Hart, he said. His voice carried clearly enough for everyone to hear. Would you do me the of becoming my wife? For several seconds, she could not answer. Not because she lacked words. Because she had spent so many years believing this moment would never come. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. What about my age? Caleb smiled. What about it? The crowd laughed softly. Not cruelly. Warmly. Tears escaped at last. And what if people keep talking? They will. And if they do? Caleb gently took her hand. We'll ignore them together. A laugh escaped through her tears. Then she. Yes. The single word transformed everything. Cheers erupted throughout the square. Lucy nearly jumped with excitement. Caleb rose and pulled into an embrace. For the first time in decades, she no longer felt invisible. She no longer felt unwanted. She no longer felt defined by the labels others had given her. Weeks later, as autumn painted the frontier gold, rode beside Caleb across the sprawling ranch. Ahead of them galloped the great black stallion, the same untamed horse that had changed both their lives. It slowed beside her, calm and trusting. Smiled. Some hearts, she realized, were never impossible to tame. They simply waited for the right person to understand them. The morning bell rang across the little frontier town, just as the first streaks of sunlight touched the rooftops. Children hurried toward the whitewashed schoolhouse, carrying slates beneath their arms, their laughter floating through the crisp air. Standing at the doorway waiting for them was Hart, a woman whom every child adored and nearly every adult underestimated. At 38 years old, had become as familiar a part of the town as the church steeple and the general store. Her chestnut hair was always neatly pinned beneath a modest bonnet. Her dresses were simple, practical, and several seasons out of fashion. There was nothing flashy about her appearance, yet there was a quiet grace in the way she carried herself. The children noticed it. Their parents rarely did. Most people simply called her the schoolteacher. Others called her something far less kind. Poor, the women often whispered when they believed she could not hear. Such a shame, never found a husband. She's becoming an old maid. At her age, she ought to accept she'll remain alone. The words followed her everywhere. At church, at the market, at town gatherings. Sometimes they arrived disguised as sympathy. Other times they came as outright mockery. Had learned long ago not to react. She smiled politely, lifted her chin, and continued with her life. Inside, however, the remarks left scars. Years earlier, she had imagined a different future. She had dreamed of a husband, a family, and a home filled with children of her own. But life had unfolded differently. Her mother had died young. Her father had grown ill. Teaching became more than a profession, it became a necessity. 1 year became 5. 5 became 10. Then suddenly, she was 38, and the town had already decided her story was finished. That morning, after her students settled into their seats, moved between the rows, helping younger children practice their letters, her voice remained patient even when mistakes were repeated. Her smile never faded when a nervous child struggled. To her students, she was not an old maid. She was simply Miss Hart, the person who believed in them when no one else did. Later that afternoon, classes ended and the children rushed home, remained behind cleaning chalk from the blackboard. The schoolhouse gradually fell silent. Outside, hoofbeats echoed along the road. She glanced through the window. A tall rider passed the building atop a powerful bay horse. Even from a distance, she recognized him. Caleb Turner. Nearly everyone in town knew Caleb. He owned the largest ranch for 50 miles. He employed dozens of ranch hands. His cattle filled entire valleys. Yet wealth was not what made him famous. It was his reputation. Since the death of his wife several years earlier, Caleb had become a man of few words and fewer smiles. People respected him, but they rarely approached him. He attended church when necessary and spoke only when required. Claimed grief had hardened him. Others said loneliness had. Whatever the reason, he remained distant from nearly everyone. As Caleb disappeared down the road, returned to her work. Their lives occupied entirely different worlds. By evening, the town square buzzed with excitement. Merchants had set up stalls, families gathered near food wagons, children chased one another between lanterns hanging from wooden posts. The monthly community social had arrived, drawing nearly every resident into town. Attended mostly because her father insisted. "You spend too much time working," he told her gently. "I spend exactly enough. You spend too much time alone." She smiled, but offered no argument. Now she stood near the edge of the gathering, watching families mingle beneath the growing twilight. A familiar ache settled inside her chest. Everywhere she looked, husbands stood beside wives, mothers carried Barbies, couples laughed together beneath lantern light. She wondered what it might feel like to belong to someone. Then she pushed the thought away. Some dreams only made loneliness worse. Suddenly, a scream shattered the evening. People turned. Across the square, chaos erupted. A massive black stallion burst through a broken fence and charged into the crowd. Women shrieked. Children cried. Men jumped aside. The horse reared violently, its dark mane whipping through the air. Its eyes blazed with panic and fury. "Get back!" someone shouted. "It's Turner's Stallion." The animal had become legendary throughout the county. No rider had successfully broken it. No ranch hand could control it. Several had been thrown violently to the ground while trying. Now the beast thundered directly through the crowded square. Panic spread instantly. People ran in every direction. Tables overturned. Lanterns swung wildly. Dust filled the air. Near the center of the square, a small boy froze in terror. The stallion was heading straight toward him. Before anyone else could move, stepped forward. Gasps rose from the crowd. "What is she doing?" Someone stop her. But continued walking. Calmly, slowly. The horse snorted and pawed the ground. Its muscles trembled. Its ears flattened, yet showed no fear. Years of teaching frightened children had taught her something important. Panic only created more panic. She spoke softly. The words were too quiet for anyone else to hear. The stallion tossed its head, took another step, and another. The crowd held its breath. The black horse stared at her. For a long moment, neither moved. Then something remarkable happened. The stallion's breathing slowed. Its head lowered slightly. The wild fury in its eyes began to soften. Extended one hand. The horse hesitated. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, it moved forward and gently pressed its nose into her palm. The entire square fell silent. No one could believe what they were seeing. A moment later, rested her hand against the animal's neck. The stallion stood perfectly still. Tamed. Not by force, not by ropes, but by patience. And standing near the edge of the crowd, having witnessed every second of it, Caleb Turner could do nothing except stare. For the first time in years, something had captured his attention completely. And it was not the horse. It was the woman everyone else had overlooked.